Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. Woohoo! I'm so excited to be welcoming in season 3. If you've been with us for a while, you know that this podcast is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And in today's episode, we're going to see that as you take time to evaluate the frequencies, the vibrations in what you're checking into, the thoughts and emotions, that those are things that help propel you forward in creating your life. I'm so excited because today we have a Hey Mish. Oh my word, I can't wait to tell you what Hey Mish is. So I asked you all on Instagram what you wanted for season 3, and I got great feedback. The feedback that I got helped me decide the structure and the things that we'll be seeing in season 3. So the first thing that you'll really see is motivational and educational mindset checks that encourage you to live in your heart space and check you into this life that can be completely fulfilling in such an expansive and beautiful way. And then the second thing that you'll see is that we'll have some guest episodes. I don't anticipate that we'll have a lot, but we'll have a few. And then the third thing, the one that I'm the most excited about, is something called Hey Mish. And this is where I get to hear from you. The last 2 seasons of the podcast, you got to know me a lot. We went through my journals. We went through my husband's thoughts. We've been through a lot of things. And I cannot wait that in the Hey Mish series, as often as you all respond or write in or ask questions, seek for advice, maybe just share where you're at in life for the benefit of our audience, whatever it is, I'm so excited that we get to hear from you. And that's really, really important to me. So as you write in, then I will respond. And today we have the first example of Hey Mish. I'm so excited. Stay tuned to the end of the episode and I'll let you know how you can submit your own Hey Mish with whatever query or quandary or comments you have. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to respond to you on the podcast. Just so that you know, there will be options for you to write in and to also leave a voice memo, which is exactly what Malia did today. Malia is one of our listeners from Canada. She has kids, and she's super busy with that life, and she took a moment to pause and tell us how the podcast had been affecting her, something that had been going on for her. And I asked her if she would record it and put it in a voice memo so that we could talk about it on the podcast. So here is our first episode with Malia as our guest. Malia, thank you so much for doing this. Without further ado, let's jump in.
Hi, Misha. I wanted to thank you for your podcast this week. It was amazing timing for me. I found myself to be in a real dip and was super frustrated with myself about it. I wanted to share it with you. For my New Year's resolution, I plan to focus more on meditation and specifically the messages that I'm choosing to believe about myself. I decided to make a goal around this for the month of January. I wanted to do a bit of a test or experiment and try something that I felt was outrageous and maybe even impossible. By just using prayer, meditation, and positive affirmations, I wanted to test out if I could lose 40 pounds in 30 days just by believing I could. I found I had gotten to a really special place in my mind of absolutely believing and knowing it was going to happen. Within the first week of believing this, I started kicking bad habits really easily, and things that were tempting for me to indulge in had lost all power in tempting me. I decided to weigh myself even though I was only about 4 days into my goal because I was curious. I found that I had already lost 6 pounds. The next day, I started into a TV series that I had been curious about for a little while. The main characters of the show had terrible habits of negative self-talk and would verbalize it a lot. I had the most bizarre reaction that was wild to me while watching the show, And the best way I can describe it was as if I and the show were vibrating at completely different and incompatible frequencies. I felt like I and the show were like repelling magnets. Up until this point, I had only ever felt a feeling in my heart that what I was watching was making me uncomfortable and maybe I should turn it off. Never had that feeling felt so physical and distinctly literal that watching a show would not actually be possible for me unless I started to vibrate at a different frequency. It was a testament to me that light and darkness cannot coexist. Light will always chase the darkness, or darkness will overcome the light, but you cannot have or be both. And the higher the frequency of vibration, the more obvious this becomes. I was in such a dilemma because at this point I was totally sucked into the show and really wanted to watch it, but knew I could only do so if I vibrated at a lower frequency. I had to make a choice and decided to postpone all the hard work I had put in with my positive self-talk. I decided to binge watch the show as fast as I could so I could get it over with and then pick back up where I left off in my experiment as best as I could. I had to give up or turn down my frequency in order to be compatible with the show. I finished the show last night and naturally today felt very much in a dip. It was so completely not worth it and I regret making that choice. I was feeling so bummed and quite depressed today, and then I listened to your episode. It was such an encouragement to me. Thank you. I realized that what I had experienced was incredibly beneficial to me and a great learning experience. There is so much potential for this experience to do me so much good in my ultimate quest to become a better version of myself. I realize how grateful I am for the experience of being able to recognize such a stark contrast of vibrational energy. I had to give up some of my hard-earned vibration in order to be compatible with that show. Learning that is super cool, and I'm so grateful. As for my goal and experiment, there were some precious days of hard mind work wasted, and so I'll have to probably start over. But really, it wasn't a waste. It was so necessary for greater future success. The Lord was in it. Thanks for helping me out of the dip and back up the hill so I can continue to roll down the hill even faster than before. We'll see where this experiment takes me. Thanks again for this week's podcast and all the podcasts previous. They have changed my life in countless ways. Sincerely, Malia.
I have chills all over. I love hearing from you, Malia. This is incredible. And I love the way that you so willingly walked us through your experience, showing us a real life application of how this is all panning out and working for you and the things that you're seeing and the ways we get to learn by the things that you are seeing. Absolutely beautiful. And I am on fire to take this apart with you and everybody listening. All right, before we dive into a single thing, I want to focus on one little thing that you said, Malia. You said it was a testament to me that light and darkness cannot coexist. Light will always chase the darkness, or darkness will overcome the light, but you cannot have or be both. The higher the frequency of vibration, the more obvious this becomes. Ding, ding, ding. This is like the whole thing right here. Like the whole idea that you can see so much more clearly because you keep elevating is the most beautiful part of this whole thing that you've written. I love it so much. And I wanted to start off by telling you a quote that I recently heard on a show called All the Light We Cannot See. And they said on that show, all the darkness cannot exist, even for 1 second when you turn on the light. Ugh, can we just let that be a theme of this entire conversation that we have? That the moment you turn on the light, the darkness is gone. Just over, gone, bye. I love starting off and sort of setting the tone for the episode with that idea. Okay, and now I just kind of want to talk about everything as it comes. But to give us a little bit of structure, what I'm going to address first is, I'm wondering if anybody listening is like, wait a minute, is she crazy? Is she crazy to think that by thought alone, we can alter our physical being? And I want to break that all the way apart. What actually can change based on our thoughts. And then I want to dive into the frequency, how when we are in alignment with what we are striving to be, how it welcomes it to us. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Woo! I'm so excited. So let's start with this idea of losing weight because of our thoughts. And what actually would that be? Would it be that it changes the food? Like the structure of the food that we're putting into our mouth? Is it going to change the state of our body, right? The way that we consume our food? Or would it change our actions? Somehow would it change the state of how we think, therefore changing our actions? So if you're guessing all three, you're right. And I want to take you through a few things to help you kind of look at it. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to take a look at all of these things. Okay, so the first thing that I really want to reference is a book called E Squared by Pam Grout. She did E Cubed and E Squared, and they're very fun books. Each of them are, like, each chapter is kind of like an experiment, things that you can do the same way that Malia is trying out this experiment. Pam Grout essentially has a chapter in this book called the Jenny Craig Principle, and it's the whole idea of proposing and showing us that the way that we think changes the process, and therefore she proposes that you do an experiment and only change your thoughts around your food, and then not change anything about your diet, and just do an experiment and see how it works. And so I think this one's really interesting. I'm going to take it apart just a little bit with you, some of the things that she talks about. I love the quote she references by Carl Frederick. She said, "Your body is simply a living expression of your point of view about the world." She talks about wishing that the energy provided by the way you think, by what you say, the way that you feel towards your food, that those things should be included on food labels, which is such a wishful but fascinating thought, if that could actually be. The one thing that I think is fascinating that she really talks about is an experiment done by Baxter. She says that he's a guy that started the largest lie detection agency in the US. And he attached one day, kind of by just boredom almost, a galvanometer to a houseplant. And essentially through the process of what he went through, he understood that plants absorb our thoughts, that plants have a reaction, not just to being physically harmed by us, like by being neglected, or maybe by dipping their leaves in hot coffee, or physical harm by burning the leaves, but also by our thoughts, by our intentions. He was able to measure that those things are actually affecting the plant, that he was able to measure that. And it was a phenomenal experiment. So Pam essentially teaches us that our food can absorb our thoughts, which is kind of a far-fetched idea for us, right? That's what? I'm not sure about that. But she essentially also says that what we think and say about ourselves is absorbed by our body. And in the same pattern, we respond to those things. She talks about The Biology of Belief, which we've talked about on this podcast before, that book by Bruce Lipton, and how the environment around the cell is more important than what is inside the cell. She talks about how the yogurt experiment, we've talked about that on the podcast before too, where a person is sitting in front of yogurt, not attached to the yogurt, but that there is hooks or electrodes that are in this bowl of yogurt. And it kind of proves that this yogurt is alive. Because when this person that's sitting in front of the yogurt is asked different questions, like about their attorney or their ex-wife or whatever, the electrodes that are hooked to the yogurt kind of go a little bit crazy, essentially showing that our food can absorb our energy. And then basically we're consuming that. So it's a very interesting look at how we can alter with our own energy, our own thoughts, our own frequency, the things that we are consuming and putting inside of our body. And so essentially, she proposes the idea that our thoughts can change our body weight simply because of the energy that we are checking into, right? It's kind of a little bit of a marriage between what is being changed outside of us, like the state of our food, and also the state of ourselves inside. She challenges us that every single time that you make a disparaging remark about yourself, about your body, about I shouldn't eat this because, or oh my gosh, I really shouldn't eat this, but I'm going to reverse that. And instead of saying those things, trying to say something like, wow, I'm so happy that I get to experience this pleasure. This is an indulgence for me and I'm really enjoying it, right? So it's kind of like being able to flip the switch inside of your brain and understanding that eating is an energetic experiment, essentially helping us see that what we think affects our body and what we think also cannot help but influence our food. Interesting. So there is that side that we can kind of take a look at does it actually change the food that we're consuming? More importantly, I think the way that it alters us, right? The way that she kind of touches on that is really important. The state of our body and what changes inside of us to be able to be absorbing this food in the way that we are absorbing it. So there's a girl named Emily Malomas, and she wrote an article that I will link in the show notes for you so that you can have a look at it and read it because it's super interesting. She talks about how our thoughts can alter our body and the way that we absorb food. So she proposes that if the food in front of us is something that we deem as healthy and delicious, then our body, like the hypothalamus, modulates positive messages through the activation of the parasympathetic system. And that can actually stimulate our digestion and activate our metabolism. And then on the flip side, she says that if you feel guilty and disgusted with yourself because you're eating something, then it triggers negative emotions to signal the sympathetic nervous system. And that actually has an effect that inhibits our digestion by inhibiting gastrointestinal motility. Okay, mucosal secretion and blow flow. That's what she says. Essentially, it slows down your digestion and has a negative effect on the digestion inside of your gut. So it's interesting how she's drawing the parallel between our thoughts and the way that we digest, the actual response of our body in being able to absorb or let some things pass. Interesting thought, right? And so she references this trial, this experiment that some researchers did. And they took a milkshake because they were curious of the same thing. And they took a milkshake that was exactly the same and they put it in two separate packages. And they advertised one as like a low-calorie drink. They called it Sensa Shake. And they advertised it having 0% fat, 0 added sugar, and only 140 calories. And then the other packaging had the exact same thing inside of it, but they called it indulgence. And they labeled it as having 620 calories, saturated fat, sugar, and both of the shakes were the same, exactly the same. They both contained 300 calories. So the research participants both drank their shakes, and then the researchers measured something called ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hormone secreted in the gut known as a hunger hormone. And when those levels rise, it's your body's way of signaling that it needs to eat. And when you eat a big meal and you become satiated, those levels drop. So researchers found that our mind has way more to do with all of this than just the composition of the food. Let that sink in. The people who drank the calorie-dense shake called indulgence experienced 3 times higher drop in this ghrelin, right? Like signaling, I'm not hungry anymore. I've had enough. Where the people who drank the low-calorie shake were perceiving that they needed more. Essentially, the people who thought they were getting more calories thought they had enough. They said, okay, I'm good. Like, I don't need more. Whereas the other people would have had a signal that said, I probably need more still. I'm still hungry. Isn't it interesting? It's so fascinating that what we think really does affect us on those levels, on the level of which our body actually responds. Fascinating to me. I love her thoughts about food is not the enemy, it is your life force. It's the correlation between our mind and what we think about our food that might be a little bit more important. She definitely in the article goes through letting go of your negative feelings around food so that you can have a healthy relationship, so that you can do the best on your part to be able to trigger the right things, the right ways of the best way that you digest, or the best way of the signals that you can be receiving from your body that you're satiated and that you're doing great, right? I think it's really, really cool. There's also the mention of blessing our food, being able to actually say a religious blessing or even just being grateful for your food. Both of those actions, studies have shown that it actually increases your salivation to get your body ready to start the digestive process. And therefore, what we see is it's changing the state of our body to be able to receive that food differently. I've also heard of other studies that have, when you bless your food, it actually changes the food, the state of the food itself. I've also have a study in my mind that I heard of from a guy that was talking about what you think about when you're eating a donut. I think he was talking about a donut and the way that your body absorbs the donut differently based on what you think about what you're eating. And I thought it was so fascinating at the time. And it's been a year and a half since I read it and I can't find where it's at. So, Malia, if I find it, I will get that to you. And if anybody that's listening knows what I'm talking about, then signal me, let me know, and I will send that on to Malia and anyone else who's interested. The thing is it's interesting to take a look at the way that they prove these things. It doesn't mean that you can go around eating donuts and wishing that they're really good for you, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, we're healthy. That it doesn't work like that. But it does have a proper place in helping us evaluate, are we beating ourselves up with the thoughts when we are eating certain things or in certain times? Or it really helps us break down what it is we are thinking about our food and evaluate if we have a good relationship with our food. I think it's really important personally to make sure that I am sort of having this checklist when I'm trying to be good or do good. I have a checklist of trying to get the right foods in my body and focusing less about what I don't want in my body. I've been around long enough to know what isn't good for me to pick up, and so I don't really need to spend a lot of energy there. It's just when I really am focusing on getting in everything that I actually do need, there's not a lot of room for things that I don't need. And so that kind of helps me, and that then when I do check into something that, is good, for my pleasure's sake, right? For me to be able to truly enjoy, it's like I have a better space for that. I have okay, I'm going to allow this. I'm going to check into this. I'm going to truly enjoy this. And I think it also helps me decide if I even need that or not, right? Okay, so let that be what it is. But moving forward, we've talked about the way that it possibly could change the food that we're consuming. It can change, for sure, the state of our body around what we are consuming. And honestly, I think that these things are super interesting to take a deeper dive if you're interested. But the other thing that I think is really the most valuable of all of the things that we're talking about is that when we change our thoughts and feelings around something, that it actually changes the way we act in an automatic way. It changes the state of our subconscious. So it alters the actions, in other words, the food that we might reach for. And I think ultimately that this sort of equation the state between if we can change our thoughts to, instead of like, I'm a person who just eats whatever I want, to I'm a person who is mindful about the choices that I make, and I give my body nutritious things, and I make sure that my body has good fuel that will help me to move forward in the very best ways, keeping me young, keeping me nutritionally fit, right? All of these things, like if we start to think that way and we start to define ourselves in that manner, then naturally we fall into being that person. It's like we don't have to beat ourselves up so much about in our mind, like, is this a good choice? Is that a good choice? We naturally and intuitively would be drawn to those things. And it's easier to have a default way of acting. Like instead of walking into the kitchen and rummaging for the piece of sugar, we're like, oh, I know that apple will actually really fill me up and give me what I need. So ultimately, I think the best things that we can be asking ourselves is, how do we shift and redefine ourselves so that as we're stepping into this new definition of ourselves, making good choices becomes the default? And Malia, you're just spot on with checking into the frequency because it is the frequencies that we check into, the person that we're being, that allows us to be what we hope to attract. Okay, so everything in your life really is the way you created it, whether you have a conscious realization of that or not. And I always really try to, whenever we talk about that part, because I think that sometimes that can feel, very discouraging to some people to have this wake-up call to say like, wait, so you're saying I created like this negativity? You're saying I created myself to be overweight? You're saying I created myself to be... All of that can be very discouraging thoughts until you realize that if you created it, you can create something different. It's not until we take ownership of it that we can actually do something different, right? What would make you think that you can take ownership of it and do something different with it if it wasn't created somehow by you in the first place? and careful to give space to when we say that it was created by you, right? When we take a look at that, it's created by all the thoughts that were passed to you by the people who raised you, like most typically your parents, by the world that you are surrounded by Satan, who's the master of all lies, who tries to tell you you're not worth anything or you can't measure up or all those things. And these are all parts of it that have all created the reality that you're living in. But the most profound and freeing part of it is when you realize how much you had to do with it in the first place, that you can have so much to do with it, with whatever you choose to create for your future, right? Because when all of the outside world is influencing us, essentially we're allowing that. And much of the time we don't realize we're allowing it, right? It's not until we wake up to what we're allowing that we start to feel like, oh, shoot. So you're telling me I created that? And then also the freedom of the future of like, wow, you're telling me I can create that? All right, let's move, right? It starts to then get exciting. When you can see that your world is what you believe it to be right now, then you can also see that it's not until you change what you believe it to be that your world would change, because you changed yourself. Does that make sense? And that's why when Malia is talking about checking into this show that's a lower vibration, if she were checking into this show that's a lower vibration, and typically we have similar thoughts at the same vibrational frequency that we check into, right? So if Malia is trying to create a space where she honors and respects her body, where she just loves it, right? All the way. And she's creating a new future and something else that looks like a thinner her or whatever, right? Then what we would really need to ask is, can she handle lower level thoughts? Can she be checking into, and Malia already knows this. The way that she wrote her entry, right? The way that she spoke when she said, "Hey, Mish," she knows this. And she just learned it on a level that's absolutely beautiful. Because next time she's up against the same choice of checking into a lower vibrational frequency, she gets to really say, I actually don't want to check into that. I know what that will do. And I don't want anything to do with that because I don't want to have to recover. I would rather spend my time to continue to rise than to be on this roller coaster. But beautiful that she recognized that the dip is giving her the momentum to be able to say no in the future. Wow, right? That's a lot of power. That's a lot of power. And so it's really important to be able to see that as we are moving forward, we are really molding ourselves into something that we are creating. We have that power. We get to choose that. When Malia is essentially creating this new self, what she's doing also, just so that you know, is she's employing what would be her most loyal assistant. She's employing something called her subconscious brain. And when you can get your subconscious brain online to be believing that things are a certain way, that's when you have changed the automatic responses. The things that you reach for will be different. The automatic thoughts and the patterns that you're having about yourself and your body will be positive. They'll be good because you've reprogrammed this subconscious mind. And truly the best way to do that is not really through our thoughts, it's through our feelings. And so when we're really trying to take it apart, one of the most important things to look at is saying, what are you really feeling about yourself? Thoughts and feelings are so interconnected that looking at your thoughts helps you to see your feelings also, right? So if you are sitting there thinking over and over that you have to lose the weight to make your reality essentially come true, then you will always be stuck in that like vortex of, quote, needing to lose the weight. But if you can check into a different feeling, the feeling of that I've already lost the weight, or just feeling that I love my body and I give my body everything that it needs. Whatever it is that you can check into that helps propel your thoughts, your feelings into a way that's healthy, you're giving your subconscious mind these messages. And if you can give your subconscious mind those messages, you have just successfully reprogrammed. So what you really start with is you cultivate that desire. You figure out what you want your new reality to look like. And you decide what it is you really, really want. And then you use vision and feeling. Who would you want to be? What does it feel like? What are the things that you do? You have to walk through letting go of the limits that get in your way, the logic, the doubt. That's especially where checking into frequencies can really, really help you. Because, right, have you ever heard of the snowball effect? That when you think a thought, within 17 seconds, you think another thought that is it 7 seconds or 17 seconds? Either way, quickly enough, you think another thought that's similar to the previous thought that you had. And so if you're in high-level frequency, high-level thoughts, it's less likely that you're going to be dipping down into those low-level feelings of doubt about what it is you're trying to create. And you start to see yourself there. You start to feel yourself there. And you recreate this and you do it every day. And as you do that every single day, you keep retraining that subconscious mind. And you keep retraining your body on how to process these things, right? And it's not just food, it's everything in your life. It's all of the things. Food gives us a really good example of how it works. But it's an incredible thing to drop in and say, wow, this applies to every single thing. And that's why it's really essential, in my opinion, to do heart coherence and to learn heart coherence. Because when you do that, you're teaching your body to feel something different. You're teaching your body how to check into a high level vibration very quickly and on demand. So it's not something you have to wait around for the outside world to help you shift. You check into that. And then when you're in heart coherence, you can spend time visioning and feeling these feelings about yourself. And it sort of unlocks a brand new way, a more powerful way to really bring forward your future in an accelerated path. It's phenomenal. There's another element to the whole equation, and that is surrendering. And that is kind of like not holding so tightly to the outcome needing to be a certain way. That's why the time can get tricky, right? So Malia, you've said 40 pounds in 30 days, which is great to give your mind a structure of what it is that you are trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve fast weight loss. There's all kinds of questions that could come up around this, like how fast is it healthy to lose weight and all these different things. We're not going to get into any of that. I am just going to give you the instruction to know that when we set time limits, it can get tricky. And so we want to step into knowing that it can happen for you and that it's happening now. But the timeline I'm just telling you that I think it can get a little bit tricky, because when we are truly stepping into surrender, we're allowing it to happen when it's supposed to happen. So just kind of like let yourself be in this fluid flow. And if feeling and saying that feels expansive and good, then go ahead and say it. But if at any point, you make it halfway through the month and you're like, dang it, I'm not on track. You see how that can like cause you to dip so fast? And you just did what that show did to you. And it just took you right back down into that negativity. And so that's why I say time can be tricky. Stay in the vibration, in the vision, in the feeling, in these high level creative ways of who you're being. Become that way on the inside, and then your outside conforms. So essentially remember to evaluate the thoughts that you're thinking, because sometimes we bypass our feelings. If you can always be looking at your feelings and say like, ooh, that doesn't feel so great, and then you can correct from that point, that's a good thing. But also remember to look at your thoughts. Look at your thoughts, because they're a source. They're an arrow that points to what you're feeling. And I really love how Malia said, but it really wasn't a waste. It was so necessary for greater future success. That is such an incredible win. I'm so thrilled for you, Malia. There are so many of your thoughts that I just underlined that I was like, oh my word, this is such gold, right? Like, how many of us really have that thought to just binge watch the show as fast as I could so I could get it over with and then pick back where I left off as best I could? That's such a human thing. And so I think everybody's hearts like go, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I just need to have like a big fat complaining session about someone in my family, and then I'll feel better and I'll pick it back up. Until we realize, like Malia did, that we're giving up hard-earned vibration to be compatible with those actions. and then learning the greater lesson once we can see it more clearly. It's so beautiful. I love the way that we started by just saying, okay, wait, is she crazy to think that she could change the weight of her body by her thoughts alone? And here's the question that I want to propose back to you. Wouldn't it be more crazy to implant all of the thoughts and then not listen to your body as it tries to make the pivots to accommodate the new environment that you're giving it? That is the most pivotal part. The most pivotal part is being able to listen to your body when it's telling you to reach for something that your body needs versus something that you've had too much of. It's checking into those higher vibrations and not giving in to the allure, right? And recognizing what's really, really worth it, because it's not worth it to throw you out of it and all of that incredible, beautiful movement that you've had in the right direction. I love a quote by Earl Nightingale. He said, "Whatever we plant in our subconscious mind and nourish with repetition and emotion will one day be a reality." So Malia, as we close, what I would propose to you is, as you are on this path of altering your outward reality with your thoughts, make sure that you're checking into the emotion. Make sure that you're feeling what it would feel like once that's a reality for you. And feel it as though you're experiencing it now. That right there is a pivotal key for you in moving forward and having great success in the equation that you're really trying to work through. All right, my friends, I hope that in this episode that you're able to see that the frequencies that you check into, that the thoughts that you have and the emotions that you have, that you allow yourself to check into when you say on demand, that those things in your life will bring you and give you more power than you thought you ever had. All right, my friend, I hope you got something out of that episode. I'm so grateful to have heard from Malia, and I invite you to also share. So if there's something that's on your heart, something you have a question about, or just something that you want to share, I would love if you want to submit a Hey Mish. You can submit it in written form, or you can send me a voice memo. I do have a phone number that you can call in and leave a message at. It's 435-990-5772. The downside with leaving a phone message is that it only records your voice for 3 minutes. The other thing that you can do as an option, if you want to leave a voice memo, is just record it on your phone and then email me an MP3 version of your voice memo. You can email that to hello@myfriendmisha.com, and you can also email me in written form, and I will read it for you on the podcast if you would prefer. The other thing for you to know that's really important with this is that you can choose to use your name or you can choose to keep it anonymous. Just let me know which one you want to do. So start thinking about what is on your heart to ask or to share. I for real cannot wait to talk about topics that come from you. And if you need any help at all submitting with the Hey Mish, just reach out to me. You can email me or reach out to me on Instagram. You can just DM me a message at myfriendmisha. Thank you so much for joining us for the first episode in season 3. And if I could, I would totally ask you to make sure that you have rated and reviewed the podcast. Whenever you start a new season with your podcast, if people are rating and reviewing it, they suggest it more to other people. So it's actually an incredible window for the podcast to be able to grow. And I would really appreciate you making sure that you put the amount of stars you think that the podcast deserves. And then also if you'll just write a couple sentences as a review, that helps the podcast so incredibly much. And I would love to leave you with a quote by Napoleon Hill today that feels really expansive to me. He said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. Until next time, my friend.